Symposium Day 3. We hope you've all had as fantastic a time as we have over the last 2 days. Our final day here, we are going to get started with our short talks, and we've got some really fantastic talks coming up. And then we'll have a short break from 11 to 11:15, followed by some more short talks and our closing remarks. I'm going to go ahead and let our first presenters take the floor, and we are all very excited to hear from you.
Hello, welcome. My name is Christine Nieman Hislop, the Data Education Librarian for NNLM Region 1 at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. This was a network of the National Library of Medicine project collaborating with Amy Yarnell and Irmarie Fraticelli, two data services librarians at the University of Maryland, Baltimore Library Center for Data and Bioinformation Services. The Network of the National Library of Medicine, or NNLM, is the education and outreach arm of the National Library of Medicine, one of the NIH National Institutes of Health. The NNLM is composed of 7 regional offices spread around the United States, and they each offer funding for organizations and communities in their regions, in addition to a wide range of training and educational opportunities, such as around data science and research data management, what we're talking about today. And I'll hand things to Irma.
Hi. The NNLM and the University of Maryland Baltimore had hosted multiple library carpentry workshops over the last few years. If you're not familiar, the library carpentries is a curriculum that is designed to give complete beginners an introduction to programming and coding. It takes practice to progress from a beginner to an advanced level and take advantage of these tools to complete one's work more quickly or efficiently. One of the comments we often hear from carpentry's participants is that they would like more examples of applying programming tools or these skills to library work. Also, after these workshops, we often hear the same feedback and frustration. If you don't use it, you lose it. Influenced by these comments, we focus on the R programming language. We selected this programming language based on our instructors' experience and interest, and also the fact that we have included Introduction to R in our library carpentry workshops. We wanted to develop a follow-up experience that would introduce participants to topics that were not covered during the 2-day carpentries workshops. Also, we wanted to help participants build more independence by working on projects that they were interested in. We decided to call this a community of practice because we hoped to foster a community through project-based practical skills training for information professionals. Now, how did we bring this to life? We recruited participants from previous carpentry courses that we had taught as NNLM UMB collaborations. We had a small group of 8 people who registered and 5 who completed the course. Having a small group allows us to pursue one-on-one interactions with participants. And for the participants, we ask to come with a data project in mind, a project that they have been working on, or a project that they were interested in starting, but were not sure on how to structure it using R. We hold 1-hour weekly sessions for over 6 weeks in Zoom. Initially, we wanted to make sessions mostly office hours, with the idea that they would do work on their project and come to the office hours with questions. However, we quickly realized that not everyone would have questions every week, so we plan small demos of new skill set that start for the start of each session. Also, we recorded the demos ahead of time so participants would be able to review it if necessary. The rest of the time, usually around 10 to 20 minutes, was open to questions and discussions related to the participants' projects. We have three overall course objectives: practice new programming skills with real-world data, applying programming techniques to work with and visualize data, and to help participants develop confidence and skills needed to independently solve programming problems. The first weeks were focused on discussing data tasks that librarians and information scientist professionals may be exposed in their day-to-day. We choose data from different areas of librarianship based on data that we collected at HSHSL, such as shelving statistic, workshop attendance, and literature searches. The topics covered in the workshop range from reading multiple files, standardizing date formats, creating data visualization using real library data, and transforming data from white to long. Within these first 4 weeks, participants were also introduced to R packages in the Tidyverse ecosystem of packages like dplyr and ggplot too, while the last weeks were used to explore other R packages such as Renters for bibliographic search and how to use Quarto and R Markdown for creating presentations and reports. These topics were chosen based on things that instructor wish they have known about as a beginners and things that they did not get a chance to cover or were covered briefly in the library carpentry workshop. For this project, we developed multiple access points to lesson materials. In both Moodle and the project website, participants had access to lessons materials. Moodle allows us to communicate with the participants and provide us with a space to discuss any topics or doubts, while on the project website, participants were able to see weekly lesson content in a format that support participants' learning process. In the making of this website, we followed some carpentry practices, like providing the content of the lesson openly to the participants. The main goal of both tools was to provide a space where users can follow the class working side by side with the lesson plan and an R Studio window open. The data and all book content were available on OSF, and the recordings of the videos are on YouTube, and we will be sharing these links during this presentation or at the end of our slides.
To assess the class, we did a survey before and after the RCOP, the Community of Practice, asking the same sets of questions, much as is done in a typical carpentries workshop. We developed our own questions that we hoped would help show if we were successful in meeting our course objectives. We asked them to rate the questions on this slide on a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree, checking on if they were aware of how to use computer programming in their day-to-day work, if there is value in using programming, if they were likely to use programming to work with data or to visualize data, if they felt confident looking for answers to programming issues or troubleshooting issues, communicating with data visualizations, broadly speaking, and using R to create those visualizations. We followed up with a feedback session about a month after the sessions ended, so people had some time to reflect on the experience. This was hosted by a third party, so participants could feel like they could speak more freely. So what we saw from our results is that there was definitely room for improvement in all these categories at the beginning of the experience, although most people felt that they did see some value in programming, even if they weren't currently able to feel confident in their abilities to use R to work with and visualize data or find answers to programming questions. We also saw that our participants did not feel that they knew how to use programming in their day-to-day work, which is something we heard from carpentry's participants. They wanted more examples. After the COP, we were happy to see that for most of these questions, people moved more to the agree or at least to the neutral side of the scale. although we are keeping in mind that this is just a very small sample size of just 5 people and the 5 who completed the course. So this is looking at the same results numerically based on the average scores for each question. And again, we were happy to see people move more to the agree side of the scale. So that would be anything 4, 5, 3 be neutral. And we were really happy to see this, this big jump in awareness of how to use programming. Because one of our main goals was to show people how coding was relevant to them as librarians. And we also like that people increase their confidence in looking for answers to technical questions. That's this one here. Because this is key to programming independently. So it looks like we could do some more work talking about the principles of data visualization rather than just the procedures, and maybe that would help increase confidence communicating a little more. So 1 month after the workshops, we asked the participants, we asked a member of the NNLM to hold feedback sessions with the participants. The goal of this feedback session was to collect information on if they were able to bring what they learned from the R Community of Practice pilot to their day-to-day job. Also, we were interested in gathering information about how we can improve our workshops and education materials. From this feedback session, we gathered some quotes that summarize the participants' experiences. For example, in this first quote, the participant was grateful for having exercises that allowed her to refresh her memory. As we wanted to build a tailored experience for this group of librarians, the R Community of Practice provided a space where participants could refresh previous knowledge and build upon that. Another participant reflected on the structure of the lessons and website, and we were happy to learn and confirm that having material clearly presented in text was a useful resource. And lastly, an experience that we really were happy to read about was finding out how valuable the live coding sessions were to participants, especially seeing how to approach solving a coding issue or question in real time. In this quote, the participant narrates how the instructor, without having previous knowledge about an issue, was able to Google it, test the code from Stack Overflow, and resolve the participant's issue. And it's also worth mentioning that the participant then decided to continue the conversation on our discussion board on Moodle and shared how she was able to test the code and get it to work with her own data. So this example showcases how helpful it can be to learn to code and debug code in a supportive group setting. Based on the feedback we received and our own experiences, we found that it was good to have both the synchronous and asynchronous parts of the class. People liked getting to do the live demo and ask questions, and also be able to go back and view things. They felt the exercises were relevant to them and what they wanted to accomplish in their projects, and they liked that the code and data were available for them to practice on their own. There were plenty of things that we could improve, though. Most participants were several months out of their library carpentry class, so we could have done a review session at the beginning to go over core topics and spent more time talking about project ideas to get them set up for the coming weeks. There could have also been a couple sessions devoted to some extra topics that we didn't get to talk about, and maybe a wrap-up session at the end for people could show the progress they made on their projects. We wanted to spend most of the sessions focused on them and their projects, but we usually didn't have more than about 15 minutes after the demo and questions about it. And they still often found the pace of the lessons kind of fast. So we probably should have had some longer sessions or maybe separated out the instruction and question activities a little more. We didn't really want this to be like a typical course with graded assignments, but upon reflection, we think participants might have benefited from a little more structure with benchmarks to reach on their projects along the way, or having some time in the live sessions to do some work. And
So taking into account what we could improve and thinking about future plans, as this was a pilot program with a smaller number of people, we're going to be continuing to partner with the NNLM National Center for Data Services to expand and offer this program to a wider audience, hopefully next year. In order to do this, we will need more experts and mentors with more intermediate programming skills. So contact me if you're interested. And Amy and Irma are also hoping to repeat this project within UMB with a university-centered community of practice. And finally, we want to thank our wonderful participants and also give a special thanks to Justin De La Cruz from NCDS for helping with the feedback session. You can find our course links on this slide or at the QR code, which will take you to our OSF project. And also we'll share those in the chat in a moment. And finally, thank you for attending our talk. Here's our contact information. And do we have time for questions?
I think we have a moment or two.
There's a question in chat from Lenny. How much recycling of materials did you use when creating the materials?
I think we created a lot from scratch for this, but there's always like some of the carpentry lessons. I think a tutorial on Rentres that we were able to use some material from. But a lot of this was created pretty much from scratch, although we're hoping to be able to use it again for other things now that we have them. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. Our next talk is by Michael Stamper from Virginia Tech.
Good morning. So let me get my slides ready. So there we go. Well, good morning. It's really good to be here today, this morning. I am Michael Stamper. I am a data visualization designer and digital consultant for the arts at Virginia Tech University Libraries. I am within the data services group, and my main role is to help researchers and my patrons figure out what to do with their visualizations. I help them come up with ideas and think of how to present it, and help them get the files ready for wherever they need to be seen, be that for print, for web, or movies. But yeah, so I mainly do a lot of problem solving, because I'm mainly working with a lot of STEM researchers, and oops, that's a lot of my work. But yeah, I work with a lot of STEM researchers that are doing a lot of analytical work, and I help them mainly with the creative side of how to present their data and information. And I also conduct workshops on using different tools that I use to present this information. Yeah, this slide is just showing a lot of different projects that I've worked on in the past or in the currently. And as you can see, they range from going to geospatial to massive abstract networks of data, and to interactive web-based visualizations, and even do some visualization or mock-ups for like mobile designs on how to disseminate research. So mainly I work in the middle between like the STEM for the analytical side of the brain and the creative side of the brains. And I am constantly going back and forth depending on what projects are brought my way. Because I am working on so many different projects, I really don't have a chance to get to know the research in depth. So, you know, there's like no way am I going to be understanding like this next project that is coming up on acid-based chemistry. So I can maybe get an idea of what needs to be seen through reading the abstracts and talking with my clients. So there's a lot of back and forth when I work with my patrons, and a lot of iterations sometimes to get the visualizations just right. And mainly, this is where I work in the research cycle. My clients will usually do the basic foundational work of their own visualizations, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be at their level as a subject matter expert. But if I can get an idea of what they are thinking through conversations, or just getting seeing their ideas that they've coded, or that they've seen other researchers present or use, then that gives me threads to follow up on and create something that will satisfy their wants and needs. So usually I am towards the end of the research process, even though it's a cyclical process sometimes, because once I create different iterations of what they want to see and need to see, you know, they'll present it to their colleagues and get feedback from them, and then they'll send me the edits and suggestions that they'd like to see in other iterations. So sometimes it can be a long process, but at the end of it, everybody's usually pretty happy. And so another representation is, you know, I take raw data, I help them sort it, clean it, arrange it, and come up with ways to present it visually. And then, you know, if there's a story within it that somebody needs to see, I can help talk them through it to figure out what that story might be, and pick out the pieces and parts that will enforce or reinforce their arguments and present the salient points that they want their audience to see and understand. So just a quick example of sometimes this is a couple of spreadsheets of cleaned and sorted data. This is an initial render through a tool called Gephi. It's been around for, I don't know, 12, 15 years, but you know, it still works, and it gives, this is for doing like large networks, and I use this one because it gives me the networks, but it also is able to export as SVG files, which I can open in another program and make it shine. So yeah, this is raw render. There are nodes everywhere. There's edges going every which way. The labels are all layered over each other. It's a big mess, but there's something there to work with. And as I said, it does export as SVGs, so I can take that and take it apart, put it back together, however it needs to be seen, and make it a little bit more understandable. That was for a project looking at research performed on the International Space Station. And that's a little backlit because it was on a huge screen, very dark room. And yeah, the colors aren't so great on that because it is kind of blown out. But yeah, you can see that labels have been sorted. They're now legible. The colors are about more easily to be seen. There's another, this is a more simple example. Again, using Excel, Gephi. And this is another foundational render. Again, you know, it's kind of a mess. The numbers they make sense on the Excel sheet, but to a viewer without any knowledge of what's going on, it's it's a little confusing. So, excuse me, taking this initial render and a little creativity, this was for a fun project. It was not for publication anywhere other than within this particular group. And they wanted something fun to do with this, which was nice. So, because usually they're a bit more strict in the requirements for where the visualizations need to be seen and who needs to see them. This one was not the case. So we were able to do something a little bit more fun with this, and came up with an idea to transform that into a London Tube subway map. Again, you know, the nodes are still size coded, the color coding's there. And, you know, instead of having a big curvy mess, it's been flattened and people can actually see the connections. And it's a bit more engaging than looking at the previous one. Oh, excuse me. This was an interactive project, but my client came to me with a mock-up she did in PowerPoint. A lot of my clients will use their beginning visualizations or throw their concepts or put their concepts together using tools that they're familiar with. And most of those tools are not for design. But she was able to she put her ideas in a PowerPoint slide. We talked to her, and you're looking at some of the notes. There's a list of functions and features that needed to be in this online tool. And again, I mentioned earlier that I would never be like a subject matter expert in some of the projects that are brought my way, but I can take, working with the client, I can be able to get their ideas and concepts made into something real. So again, yeah, just looking at this, we're able to, you know, discuss what needs to be seen and turn it into this nice little interface. Again, yeah, so it's more easily to be used. And once it's developed, you know, students and other researchers will be able to use this product. And that is just a spec sheet of, you know, once this is developed, it passes off to developers and they'll have the blueprints for building it. Over on the right, you'll see, I used to work for the National Toxicology Program down in Durham, Research Triangle Park. And we used a lot of Section 508 guidelines in the visualizations and products that we've created there. And that is something that I build into the projects that I work with here at Virginia Tech. So you see a lot of color contrasting, checking and making sure that fonts have enough contrast to be legible. And there's some wireframes for another project. So you can see taking basic ideas of this information that needs to be seen and figuring out how users can interact with it and learn from it and get some insights. But a lot of these, everything I work with, the data, the information, in order to make it visible and understandable and meaningful, I'm pretty much working with colors, patterns, textures, scale, using typography, putting it in a layout, creating icons and shapes. And it's just, every project is like a big puzzle piece or big puzzle, and I'm just putting pieces together. And it's something that, you know, my clients and patrons, they don't have the time to do this side of their projects. So that's where I come in, because they're busy, you know, writing the grants, publishing papers, going to their conferences, and doing research. And, you know, at the end of some of these projects, you know, I actually have something that I can go present. That was at a good Gordon Research Conference up in Maine, Lewiston, Maine. So even though I'm not the subject matter expert of what's being seen, you know, I am the subject matter expert on how to present it. So it's kind of what I'm doing now. Another one, I get a lot of requests for, again, you know, making information look professional or pretty. So again, clients will send me their mock-ups of, you know, using clip art from software that they're used to using, mostly Microsoft products, PowerPoint, Word, and then I talk with them and clean it up for them.
Michael, we have about 5 minutes.
Okay. I don't have that many more slides. But yeah, I talk to them and I clean up their work and make it presentable. That one was like an 8.5 by 11 mock-up, and I turned it into take up 1/3 of a page. So that way they have more room for words. And you can see the transformation these go through from, you know, clip art to a coherent icon set. Another quick example, again, clients send me their mock-ups on the left. It goes through some cleaning, sorting, color, typography, and it gets cleaned up and made nice and pretty so that people can see what's going on with it. And there's just another quick example. Just cleaning up projects, making sure that it is legible, colors have enough contrast. And just a few shots of the process. So a lot of my clients or students will come up and say, you know, what's the best tool for visualizing this? And it's like, I can't tell you that until I see what your wants and needs are and where it needs to be seen. And plus, there are a lot of tools to choose from. But mainly, my main tools are Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, things that I can use to create easily modifiable charts and graphs and other things that are needed. Icons have been a big request, and luckily I learned this one from working at the NTP, that of Font Awesome. As you can see, there are many able to use those in Illustrator, turn them into outlines, modify them any way I want, or create custom ones from them. Of course, Tableau. Canvas is a big one. Not too sure about that yet because people ask me about it, and it's like I don't really use it a lot, but I have a lot of clients asking about it. Engage, PictoChart, there's all these other tools that I think my clients ask about, and it's like, you know, I can't really tell you what is the best one until I actually can see what they do, and most likely most of my work is done custom because they're not going to do it. Kepler for geospatial. BioRenders come up quite a few times. But yeah, the quick section on about section 508. Again, yeah, this is I try to build these into all my products that I create. And yeah, I guess that's about it. So thank you. If there are any questions, feel free to send them in chat.
Maybe I missed this, but the acid-base chemistry example, what was that ultimately used for?
That was part of a, let me see, am I still sharing?
Oh,
And
it's there now.
That was part of a grant, an internal grant at Virginia Tech. And that was for a professor to build for her students to use. I think it might still be public. I'm not sure if it's still, but yeah, that was an easy tool she wanted to build a tool for her students to do their research on because she wasn't finding anything online or available, as I understand it. So apparently, you know, the students used it. They were kind of like the beta testers and then gave feedback on how to improve it. Probably get more grant money to fix it. Any improvements.
thank you very much, Michael. Very informative. Our next short talk is Open Access Practices for GIS with Belle Lipton from Harvard University.
Hi, everybody. Can you see my slides?
Yep.
Okay, great. My name's Belle. I'm a GIS librarian with the Harvard Map Collection, and I'm going to be talking today about open access practices for GIS. Today in my talk, I'm going to be focusing on projects that are kind of beyond just sort of like a one semester story map type project. So I'm really going to be focusing on working with researchers, faculty, students who are creating data that for whatever reason they think should be preserved more long-term, sort of like outside of something like the ArcGIS online infrastructure. So I'm going to argue today that, you know, these tools like ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Online, they're amazing. The visualization analysis, everything you can do with them, super useful for students. Really glad that our students have access through a license to them. And at the same time, as they continue to become more sort of sleek, I believe that librarians have to become, you know, sort of our responsibility to do some work to disrupt kind of the ease of everything sort of existing all within the sort of Esri ecosystem, if we care about supporting our students for having these sort of long-term data management skills. So today I'm going to define, what do I mean by like ideal data management outcomes? I loved in Nina's talk yesterday talking about sort of the I in the FAIR principles, like interoperability, how hard it is sometimes to talk about and define like what we mean by this. And I really am a strong believer that a lot of this is very like context dependent. So what is the discipline that we're in? What is the technology we're using? So I'm going to at least try to define what I mean as I'm talking through these challenges. And I'm going to do that by showing some actual examples that I run into with students. And that will hopefully segue nicely into some of the challenges that I'm noticing. And I'll also talk through some of the ways I've been trying to deal with those challenges. So first example, this is a project that I was supporting with a student who's a PhD studying Indigenous history. And important context for this is that we partner a lot with another group on campus called the Center for Geographic Analysis. So they're not part of the library. And they're sort of, they offer these training programs that are pretty much exclusively in Esri products, which is a great resource for us to have on campus. It'll be very common that I'll be working with researchers sort of before, during, and after they are taking these sort of in-depth intensive trainings. And for that reason, we have a lot of cases that come up where I'm noticing how sometimes the data that's coming out of the work that they're doing, if I'm sort of following students before, during, and after, sometimes our work is kind of having to massage their data back into kind of being in open formats. So in this case, this researcher is really cool, studying the sort of land allotments via the Dawes Act, and she's really interested in finding these sort of micro histories, really interested in like disability history. So she had been doing some work with me for learning how to do georeferencing and extracting data, historical data. Then I had referred her to this, she'd been getting really into GIS. I said, go check out the Institute, like learn, bone up on all the sort of best things that you can do in ArcGIS Pro. And she had come up with, in this lower left-hand corner here, I won't be able to explain exactly what all this data is saying, but she had done some sort of really cool distance analysis, like talking about, one particular person in history, how they would have like navigated around the area. Well, Institute ends, she comes back to me and she's applying for a grant. She'd been working in QGIS up until now, and pretty familiar with like the print composer, right? Just kind of putting data together, styling like a simple static map. But she was saying, hey, I'd really like to be able to bring in this data layer that I did in the Institute in Esri into my map that I want to include for my grant proposal. And I said, sure, no problem. Like thinking, if she had it in her ArcGIS online content, like I had her open that up, and I was just thinking, oh, it'll probably be like a shape file and we can download that and bring it into QGIS and, everything will be fine. But I was surprised to see, even this was new to me, this sort of MAPX Esri map package. I had to look this one up. Unfortunately, the way that the sort of like defaults, this is a way of sort of like taking your entire sort of like ArcGIS Pro project and sort of sending it right up into the cloud. And increasingly, this is the way that that the sort of software is encouraging people to kind of default to save. So when I'm talking about sort of ideal outcomes for data management, I would say that one, in terms of formats, would be that the data that we're having helping our researchers with is you can use it sort of independently of like whichever software you choose to use for GIS, whether that's ArcGIS, QGIS, or other tools. Next thing for ideal outcomes, I'd say file relationships. I am laughing because my colleague Dave let me use his project as kind of like a bad example. But I think like we've all probably had like a case like this where you're brought onto some project where there's data and it's just a big mess, right? So on the right here, this was a project he wanted my help with, and you can see there's like lots of different versions of the similar file, and then there's a bunch of different scripts, but it's like not really clear which ones talk to which ones and how you're supposed to make sense of it all. And then on the left, we have, okay, so at the Harvard Map Collection, we do have like a front-facing sort of spatial data infrastructure where everything that's sort of fit to print is like out there and people can download it and access it. But sort of on the back end, we have all sorts of stuff in there. And I'm laughing at this 1890s underscore Germany dot shape. So if you are a researcher who is interested in studying 19th century Germany, this data could be very helpful to you, or it could be very not helpful to you. Like, we truly do not know because there's no README or anything like that. So I'm not even talking about like creating actual metadata yet, just sort of working with researchers to kind of instill the importance of, just as you're kind of working along, like keeping good notes and, you know, describing the relationships between your data and code books and stuff like that. The last thing in terms of ideal data outcomes, I'd say, are kind of describing, you know, what are your methods? I really liked this question that I got. It was forwarded to me from one of the Ask a Librarian chats, and it was from a student who's saying, hey, like, I found all this public data and I want to know, how do I cite it, right? I had done it to do, like, I think I ended up meeting with the student. They had done a bunch of analysis with the data and created all these maps. And so this librarian had found a bunch of library guides that kind of gave very literal, like, this is how you compose a citation for when you discover a GIS data set that's public. But I don't know. I'm not sure if, like, in our profession, we necessarily have like a super good best practice for this. And I'm going to kind of like make this case here. Like, if you support GIS projects, you'll know that it's really common that in between, like, researchers acquiring or obtaining data, even if it is public and open, and then where they end up, a lot of steps happen. Like, the data is transformed in so many ways, and it's transformed often in ways that are really meaningful. And like, there's a lot of decision making that the researcher is making in between kind of getting it and where they end up, where they might want to be able to share that data, right? Like, contributing to their field, right? So in this is a really common example that we get where somebody wants to be able to study, you know, compare two different variables, but they're collected or aggregated at two totally different geographic units that are not coextensive with one another. And so in this case, this researcher was looking at the impact from redlining on educational attainment. So the tan stuff are census tracts, and the other colorful ones are the redlining geographies. And so I'm just kind of sharing this sort of, this is not the final map, just kind of helping talk through, okay, what are all the steps? Like, these are two totally obtainable data sets. And in this case, like, okay, so you could run like a intersect tool where you're kind of creating a new file that has all the sort of sub geographies. And then, you know, depending on how this researcher wants to study this problem, there's all sorts of things that they could do, right? Like, they could create new statistical values for each of those intersected units, weighting it by like the area and the population. Or they could say, all right, within this bigger unit, you know, this smaller unit takes up the majority of this bigger unit. So we'll kind of like append the redlining A, B, C, or D to, you know, and say, you know, this is the majority. So these are all choices, right, that the researchers are making. And really, when they're finished and all this work that they've put in to be able to make their argument with their geospatial data, if we're setting researchers up well to be able to share their work so that it can be open and transparent and people can kind of like agree or disagree with their work, I'm just not sure if like just citing the original census data, you know, and just kind of like passively referring to that is adequate. So I'd be happy to like discuss that further with people. So how are we kind of getting around some of these problems? I really like this slide because I get to see the smiling faces of some of the researchers I've been working with. But I'd mentioned there's that group that on campus, the CGA, that offers that training. And I was really interested in seeing how our services complement one another and how we can kind of avoid redundancies and sort of augment each other's offerings. So these are three groups of three people that I was kind of following before, during, and after. And I had these sort of like interviews with them afterwards where I was asking about their experiences. And the students were really happy to have had the 2 weeks devoted only to learning like the tools and the skills of ArcGIS Pro. And at the same time, they were expressing that they were very, very happy that they had spent so much time like with me sort of scoping out all the sort of like data considerations for their research data with an eye towards publication, because it meant that in the Institute, when they were learning all these ArcGIS Pro skills, they were learning them sort of through the lens of thinking about their data. Like it really just contextualized the whole sort of experience, where they were able to kind of like think a lot more broadly about and critically about some of the stuff that they're learning. So I was able to bring some of that feedback to the instructors of this institute, who are so lovely. And I'm really happy that we have, that I know them and have them as a resource, because honestly, like while kind of staying up to date with, generally the types of things that you can do in some of this software is a huge part of our work, right? Like GIS librarianship is so much bigger than that. So having people that are very knowledgeable about every little update and change and all the things you can do in ArcGIS Pro, I'm very, very appreciative of. And so I was bringing some of these concerns to the instructors, and it's been great. Like we've been able to really collaborate, and we're going to design a lab for this upcoming year where I think, because I mean, basically what it comes down to is you can have a file, right, that's in an open format stored locally on your computer. You bring it into a project in ArcGIS Pro, and as soon as you run any sort of analysis function on it, it will default to saving the data now in their cloud, in their sort of proprietary formats. And prior to kind of having this collaboration, the ways that the instructors would handle this would say, okay, well, you can have like a folder for your working data and a folder for your final data. But now we're going to design a lab where I think what we're going to do is there's like a specific tool you have to run now to export your data to like a GeoJSON on your computer. And then I think we're going to have the students practice like pushing that up to GitHub. So it doesn't really matter like what you do. I think just anything that disrupts like sort of this seamless process where students aren't really like, right, because when you're learning GIS, it's easy for this stuff to kind of like whiz by you, right? Like learning GIS is a learning curve. So I think anything that like we can do to like pause and have students like really think about like, where's their data going? How do they want to be able to like own their own data, or, introducing some of the concerns with, some of the ephemerality of like ArcGIS Online and some of the products getting deprecated, and how hard it is sometimes to kind of transfer projects and, all that good stuff, right? So
Belle, 4 minutes.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, cool. So that's one thing. Another thing I'm doing is just kind of showing students like cool projects that I think describe data well. So here's the Land Grab U project, which is like what you would expect, kind of like story map with cool interactives in it. But what I like is if you do about this project, it can link you out to the GitHub where they're kind of saying, hey, like, here's our files, here's how we created the data. Similarly, mapping inequality. I like this one because even if people aren't already familiar with GIS, they've heard of redlining. And so I'll kind of introduce it to students like this, like, this interactive is so amazing, but like, what if they just stopped there? Instead, we actually have all the data that, they created in this process. And I'm not saying like, hey, student, create this like amazing tool all yourself, but just kind of modeling the value of including all the work that you're doing as a way to like extend your work, right? And so, and here also they have like their crosswalk scripts. What else? Of course, ideally, like we'd love to have people actually deposit like their data with us. So when I started at the Harvard Map Collection, I don't think we had any sort of like formal DMP like interviews. So I'm working on building those out. I've had a cool grant project with the researcher to kind of build in, it was through the library. So they're creating data and we're able to build in moments where the library can kind of advise, and that's kind of shaping how we're thinking about doing some of these interviews. But like not everybody's ready to just deposit their data right away. So that's why I like to teach with GitHub, is because it's just, I'll just have people think of it as like, I won't even say, there's a private setting. I'll say, think of this as like, if you're thinking about this is something that you can point to from your paper, how would you want to like organize your stuff, your README, your steps, everything? And I've had a lot of success partnering with some of the data safety librarians, right, to kind of find the sweet spot for everybody, depending on like the nuances of their research and their data. So I'll pause there. If there's anything that I'm missing, obviously, please like share with me. And if you've been thinking about any of these topics and have questions, I'd definitely be happy to chat.
This is all really interesting for me. I'm looking forward to sharing this with some other people. Our library is in the process of hiring a data and visualization librarian who will be part of a new department. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing all of these recordings with them for their own benefit. So thank you so much. We are going to take a short break from 11 to 11:15, and we will see you all back for our second round of short talks and closing remarks. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to our second round of short talks.